I was just trying to enjoy my peaceful Sunday morning when my entitled HOA president, Karen, decided my backyard would be perfect for her unauthorized yoga classes. What would you do if someone broke into your property and tried to claim it as their own in the name of community spirit? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I cherished my Sunday mornings. Living in Maple Grove Estates meant following strict HOA rules, but my backyard was my private oasis. That morning, the smell of fresh coffee filled my kitchen as I watched birds splash in my garden fountain. The peace lasted exactly 3 sips into my coffee. Oh my, this space is absolutely perfect. The voice made me jump, spilling coffee on my new rug. There she was, Karen Matthews, our HOA president, her bleached blonde head poking over my privacy fence like a nosy giraffe. She stood on what I could only guess was a stepladder on her side of the fence. "Karen, you scared me," I said, stepping onto my patio. "Is something wrong with my yard?" I immediately worried about another violation notice. Last month, she'd cited me for having wind chimes that were too musical. "Wrong? No, darling. Everything is perfect." She beamed, waving her hands excitedly. "The energy here is just divine. My yoga students will absolutely love it." I blinked, wondering if I'd heard her correctly. "Your yoga students?" "Yes. I'm starting Karma's kitchen table yoga. It's very exclusive." She emphasized the word exclusive like it was supposed to impress me. "I've been looking for the perfect outdoor space, and your yard has such wonderful feng shui." My mouth fell open as she continued describing her plans for my backyard. Where she'd put her essential oil diffusers, how she'd arrange the yoga mats, and something about crystal grids for energy alignment. "Karen," I interrupted, keeping my voice level, "I'm not interested in hosting yoga classes in my backyard. It's private property." Her smile flickered for a split second. "Oh, don't be silly. As HOA president, I know we need more community activities. The bylaws clearly state—" "The bylaws don't give you the right to use my private property," I said firmly. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." Karen's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. "I've already mentioned it to the ladies at the book club. They're very excited." She said this like it should change my mind completely. "That's unfortunate, but you shouldn't have promised them something without asking me first. Listen." She leaned further over the fence, lowering her voice. I could overlook that unauthorized bird fountain installation I noticed last week. "We help each other out. That's what good neighbors do." My heart raced at the threat, but I stood my ground. "The fountain was approved last year, Karen. I have the paperwork." She straightened up, her friendly mask slipping. "Well, paperwork can be misplaced. Things get lost in filing all the time." With that, she disappeared behind the fence. I heard the scrape of her stepladder being moved. I went inside and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, hands shaking slightly. I should have known the day would get worse when I checked my mailbox that afternoon. Glossy flyers advertised Sunrise Serenity, backyard yoga with Karen, starting next week, at my address. Through my kitchen window, I watched Karen walk door to door, chatting with neighbors and gesturing toward my yard. Several people glanced my way, nodding at whatever she was telling them. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Sarah. "Did you really agree to host Karen's yoga classes? That's so nice of you." I stared at the message, then at the flyer, then at Karen's retreating form as she finished her rounds. The sound of my security camera notification made me look up. Karen was at my front door, slipping something into my mailbox. It wasn't until she left that I discovered what it was. A handwritten note that read, "See you at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Don't worry about the liability waiver. I'm sure everything will be fine, as long as we work together." My peaceful Sunday had turned into the opening shot of a neighborhood war I never wanted. But as I watched Karen strut down the sidewalk, phone in hand, already taking early bird registrations, I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow morning would be interesting. I jumped out of bed at 6:30 a.m. to the sound of wind chimes that definitely weren't mine. Looking through my bedroom window, I couldn't believe my eyes. Karen was leading a group of 5 women through my side gate, carrying yoga mats and those fancy water bottles with motivational quotes. My heart started racing as I threw on my robe and rushed downstairs. "And this is where we'll be doing our sun salutations," Karen announced cheerfully, spreading her arms wide like she was showing off her own backyard. The women were already rolling out their mats on my carefully maintained lawn, right next to my grandmother's prized rose garden that I'd spent years nurturing. "Karen, what do you think you're doing?" I called out, stepping onto my back porch. My voice was shaking, but I tried to stay calm. "You can't just break into my property." She turned to me with that fake smile I'd seen at every HOA meeting. "Oh, good morning. I was just telling the ladies how generous you are to share this wonderful space with the community. Ladies, this is our gracious host." One of the women, wearing designer workout gear that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, waved at me, Thank you so much for doing this. Karen said you were thrilled to support local wellness initiatives. My blood was boiling, but I took a deep breath. I'm sorry, but there must be a misunderstanding. I specifically told Karen yesterday that I wasn't interested in hosting any classes here. This is private property, and you're all trespassing. Karen's smile didn't waver as she pulled out a stack of papers from her designer gym bag. Actually, according to HOA Bylaw Section 7.3, all outdoor spaces must be made available for community enrichment activities when properly requested. I've already filed the paperwork. She waved the documents in the air like a victory flag. I walked closer and noticed something odd about the papers. They looked different from the usual HOA documents I'd seen before. The font was slightly off and the letterhead seemed fuzzy, like it had been copied multiple times. I took out my phone and started recording. Karen, I've read every page of our HOA bylaws when I bought this house. There's no such rule about mandatory space sharing. Please leave now, or I'll have to call the police. The other women started looking uncomfortable, gathering their mats. But Karen wasn't backing down. She moved closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Listen here, I've got 15 more people signed up for next week's class at $50 each. I can either split that money with you, or I can make your life very difficult. Did you know your garden fence is half an inch taller than regulation? That's a $200 fine per day until it's fixed. Just then, my neighbor Tom stepped out onto his deck. He'd been watching the whole thing and had his phone out too. I've got all of that on video, Karen, including the threat. Karen's face turned red as she realized she was being recorded from multiple angles. She quickly switched back to her sugary voice. Ladies, unfortunately, it seems our host is having a mental health episode. We'll have to relocate to the community center for today's session. She started herding the confused women toward the gate. I called the police anyway, but by the time they arrived, Karen and her yoga group were gone. The officers seemed annoyed about being called for an HOA dispute, but they took my statement and gave me a case number. I had a feeling I'd need it. Later that day, I got an email from the HOA with 3 violation notices, all signed by Karen. But as I studied them more closely, I noticed something interesting. The signature didn't match the one on my holiday party invitation from last month. I started digging through my files, a plan forming in my mind. If Karen wanted to play with paperwork, I had a few documents of my own to share. That evening, my doorbell camera caught Karen placing more yoga class flyers in mailboxes along our street. But this time, she was wearing an official-looking badge I'd never seen before at any HOA meeting. I zoomed in on the footage and smiled. She had just given me exactly what I needed for tomorrow's emergency board meeting. The bright red envelope from the HOA stuck out of my mailbox like a warning sign. Inside were 3 violation notices, each one more ridiculous than the last. According to these papers, my perfectly trimmed bushes were suddenly overgrown hazards. My fence that passed inspection last year was now 2 inches too high. And get this, I was being fined for blocking community wellness activities. I knew exactly who was behind this. I called Tom and Sarah, my next-door neighbors who'd lived here for 20 years, to ask if they'd ever seen anything like this. Sarah's voice shook as she spoke. Karen came by yesterday. She said if we didn't sign a petition supporting the community yoga program, she'd find violations with our property too. Tom got on the line and added that 3 other neighbors got similar threats. Something wasn't adding up. I pulled out my folder of HOA documents. Yes, I'm that person who keeps everything. And compared the violation notices to previous HOA letters. The letterhead looked almost right, but the font was slightly different. The signature of our HOA secretary, Mr. Rodriguez, seemed off too. I'd just seen him sign for a package last week, and this wasn't his handwriting. I decided to dig deeper and pulled up the county property records website. Karen had been bragging about running yoga classes in 4 different neighborhoods. Interesting. 2 of those neighborhoods had filed complaints about unauthorized business activities in the past year. I printed everything and started a detailed timeline. That evening, while walking my dog, I noticed Karen's car parked outside the local print shop just before closing time. She walked out carrying a stack of papers that looked suspiciously official, tucking them into a folder marked HOA notices. I quietly took a photo with my phone. The next morning, I found more violation notices in my neighbors' mailboxes. Mrs. Chen, the sweet elderly lady across the street who could barely walk, supposedly had unapproved exercise equipment in her garden. The Patel's bird feeder was suddenly an unauthorized structure. Even the Thompsons' wheelchair ramp got cited as an unapproved modification. I started recording every interaction. When Karen marched up to my door demanding access to my yard for a property inspection, my doorbell camera caught her admitting she'd make the violations disappear if I just cooperated with the yoga program. She didn't notice the tiny red recording light. The real bombshell dropped when I checked my mail that afternoon. Mixed in with the usual bills was a letter from the State Business Licensing Board. I'd requested information about registered yoga instructors in our area. Karen's name wasn't on the list. Not only was she trying to take over my yard, but she was running an unlicensed business too. I carefully organized all my evidence, the fake violation notices, photos of Karen at the print shop, doorbell camera footage, property records, and business license documentation. But just as I was about to present everything to the HOA board, Karen struck again. This time, she'd posted signs all around the neighborhood announcing mandatory community wellness meetings in my backyard. My phone started blowing up with texts from concerned neighbors. They'd all received official-looking letters threatening fines if they didn't attend these meetings. Some had already paid hundreds in violation fees, afraid of losing their homes. Karen had created a perfect storm of fear and confusion, and she was using it to build her yoga empire, one backyard at a time. As I stared at the growing pile of evidence on my dining room table, I noticed something odd about Karen's signature on the latest notices. Under strong light, you could see trace marks from a computer printer. She wasn't just forging Mr. Rodriguez's signature. She was mass-producing fake HOA documents after hours at the print shop. I knew the next HOA meeting was in 2 days. Karen had no idea what was coming, but as I got ready for bed that night, a strange car pulled up outside my house. Through the window, I watched someone in a business suit drop off a thick envelope at my door. Inside was a cease and desist letter, not from our HOA, but from a law firm I'd never heard of. The game was changing, and Karen was playing for keeps. My hands were shaking as I set up my laptop for the HOA meeting presentation. But I knew I had to expose Karen's lies. The community center was packed. I'd never seen so many neighbors show up before. Karen sat in her special chair at the front, wearing her usual smug smile and designer yoga outfit. I started by showing everyone my perfectly trimmed yard photos from last week. These were taken right before I got those violation notices, I said, watching Karen's smile fade slightly. Then I pulled up the county property records I'd spent hours researching. Notice anything strange about these HOA violation letters? I clicked to the next slide, showing both Karen's fake letter and a real HOA notice from last year. The fonts didn't match, and the letterhead was slightly blurry on Karen's version. Whispers filled the room. Karen's face turned red, but I wasn't done. I did some digging, I continued, pulling up business records. Turns out Karma Yoga LLC isn't just a community activity, it's Karen's private business that she's been running without permits in 3 different neighborhoods. That's when Karen exploded. She jumped up, pointing her finger at me. You're just jealous of my success. I'm bringing wellness to this community. Her voice got higher with each word. She grabbed her phone, and to everyone's shock, actually dialed 911. Yes, hello? I need police here immediately, she screamed into her phone. I'm being harassed and threatened at a community meeting. He's showing unauthorized photos of my business. The room went dead silent, except for Tom quietly recording everything on his phone. I stayed calm, which seemed to make Karen even angrier. While we wait for the police, I said, let me show you all something interesting. I played the doorbell camera footage from last Tuesday. There was Karen, in broad daylight, stuffing fake violation notices into mailboxes while wearing her yoga pants and Namaste y'all tank top. The police arrived just in time to see Karen throw her water bottle at my laptop. Officer Rodriguez, who'd handled my trespassing complaint last week, looked from the damaged computer to Karen's red face. Ma'am, we've warned you about making false reports, he said firmly. Board member Mrs. Chen stood up, straightening her glasses. I move for an immediate emergency vote regarding Karen's position on this board, she announced. Karen tried to argue that emergency votes weren't allowed, but Mr. Patel, who'd been on the board for 20 years, pulled up the bylaws on his tablet. Actually, Section 7.3 specifically allows for emergency removal votes in cases of misconduct, he said quietly. That's when Karen played her last card. She pulled out her phone again, but this time she called her husband, a local real estate lawyer. She put him on speaker, probably hoping to scare everyone with legal talk. Instead, he made everything worse. Karen, what did you do this time? He sighed, his tired voice echoing through the room. I told you I won't represent you if you keep harassing the neighbors. I almost felt bad for Karen as she realized she'd lost control. Almost. Then I remembered how she'd threatened Tom and Sarah's kids' treehouse project last month, claiming it violated height restrictions that didn't exist. The same Sarah who now stood up and shared screenshots of Karen's Facebook marketplace posts advertising exclusive backyard yoga sessions at my address without my permission. The police took statements while the board started their vote. Karen sat alone in the corner, angrily typing on her phone, probably updating her yoga Class status to temporarily relocated. I noticed Officer Rodriguez trying not to smile as he wrote up his report. Just when we thought it was over, Karen's phone buzzed with an email. Her face went pale as she read it. Turns out the state business licensing board had some questions about her yoga enterprise. I might have sent them an anonymous tip with evidence of her operating without permits or insurance. The expression on her face made all those hours of research worth it. As Mrs. Chen tallied the votes, I couldn't help wondering, would Karen finally learn her lesson? Or was this just the beginning of an even bigger battle? The emergency HOA meeting room fell silent as I played the doorbell camera footage on the projector. There was Karen, clear as day, stuffing fake violation notices into mailboxes at 5 a.m., but that wasn't even the biggest bombshell of the night. I have more, I said, my hand steady as I clicked to the next slide. These are text messages from Karen to 3 different yoga studios threatening to report them to the city if they didn't shut down their morning classes. The crowd gasped. Board member Janet dropped her coffee cup. My neighbor Tom stood up, waving a stack of papers. She tried to fine me $500 for having wind chimes because I wouldn't let her use my driveway for parking during her illegal yoga sessions. Sarah chimed in from the back. She told me my garden gnomes were against HOA rules when I complained about her students blocking my car. Karen's face turned redder than my garden tomatoes. She jumped up, phone in hand, fingers trembling as she dialed. "You're all harassing me! This is a conspiracy," she screamed into her phone. 911? Yes, I need police here immediately. I'm being threatened by an angry mob. 3 minutes later, 2 police officers walked in. Officer Rodriguez, who had responded to my trespassing call last week, recognized me immediately. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "filing false police reports is a serious offense. This is the 3rd time this month you've called 911 for HOA disputes." That's when our HOA treasurer, Mr. Johnson, cleared his throat. "While we're all here," he said, pulling out a thick folder, "I've discovered some concerning transactions. It seems our former president has been using HOA funds to pay for her yoga teacher, certification, and marketing materials." The room exploded with angry voices. Karen tried to run for the door but tripped over someone's walker. As she scrambled to her feet, her phone fell, and dozens of notifications lit up the screen, all from different neighborhood HOA groups where she'd been running the same scam. Board member elections happened right there. Janet became our new president. Tom took over as vice president, and Sarah was voted in as community events coordinator. Their first act? Creating clear guidelines about private property rights and establishing a proper process for community activities. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, while I was watering my lawful, violation-free garden, a news van pulled up. Turns out Karen's yoga scam had been going on for years, across 3 different counties. She'd been intimidating elderly residents into hosting wellness sessions and pocketing all the profits while using HOA funds for her personal expenses. The police investigation revealed she'd collected over $50,000 from unsuspecting yoga students who thought they were attending official HOA-sponsored classes. She'd even registered a fake wellness consulting company to make it look legitimate. 2 weeks later, our neighborhood hosted its first genuine community event, a garden sharing program organized by Sarah. Everyone brought plants, seeds, and stories to share. Tom set up a coffee station, and Janet made sure all the proper permits were in place. I stood back, watching kids run through sprinklers and neighbors, actually talking to each other instead of writing complaint letters. Mr. Rodriguez, now off duty, stopped by with his family and some homemade salsa. "You know," he said, "we get calls about HOA disputes all the time, but this is the first one that ended with a real community coming together." As for Karen, last I heard she's been banned from holding any HOA position in the state. She moved away to focus on her wellness journey, hopefully somewhere without an HOA. We even spotted her failed yoga business scheme on an episode of local news, Community Scam Alert. My backyard is still mine, used for nothing more exciting than weekend barbecues and the occasional meteor shower viewing party, all with proper invitations, of course. The new HOA board framed our security camera footage as a reminder of what happens when power goes to someone's head. They called it the Great Yoga Rebellion of 2025. Sometimes, standing up to entitled people isn't just about protecting your own property. It's about protecting an entire community from those who would abuse their power. And yes, I did finally get those garden gnomes Sarah recommended. They're doing yoga poses. The HOA approved them unanimously.